All right. Let's see how this works, Nets fans. Who is with me? Let me go find something quickly. Okay, let's share this out. Crimson, thanks for joining me, mate. All right, I'll get stuck into this in a little bit. Let me get my stuff open. All right. All right. Give it 1 minute and then I'll jump into the episode. All right. Get my doc open and we will get stuck in. All right, let's get the show on the road. What is up, Nets fans? Jack Manuel here for a live Brooklyn Buzz from my house, from Queen Beyonce behind me. So let's get stuck right in. Summer League takeaways. There's plenty been happening at Summer League so far. What I'm going to do is I've got some notes on my little cheeky Google Docs. I'm going to dive into each player and just go through their pros and cons. If anyone who might be watching or join later on, throw some comments in there, throw some questions in there. And we'll see how we go. Well, let's see how this thing goes. All right. So firstly, Yegor Djemin. I wanted to go through his positives. First, I think his play of the Summer League so far was the massive driving dunk that he had off that inbounds pass against the Magic on Wednesday night, Thursday, my time. That was an insane play. And for me, that's something that it was a glimpse of what Yegor can be if he gets that strength, physicality in himself and can become a more forceful player rather than sort of the perimeter player that we've sort of seen so far. So that was really great to see. His 3-pointers, what is he, like 10 of 23? Let me find his stats. I've got his stats here. Where is it? Here we go. His stats. So he was 4 of 8 against the Magic the other night and 10 of 23, over 43%, from beyond the arc. And he was brilliant. He was quite simply brilliant from beyond the arc. And his form, look, I was skeptical about the shot because he did it in open gyms. He did it in the sort of practices and such. But he was able to translate that against, look, it's not NBA level defense, but against, other players, against, defenses that were hounding him a bit. And he had, I think the big takeaway was he was hitting him at big moments. What was it? 3 triples in the final 2 minutes, and it allowed the Nets to have that comeback win against the Orlando Magic. So that was huge, massive, massive, massive for Jaeger to be able to really prove that at a big stage. And for me, I guess what we've seen so far is the 3-point shot has been his 1 yard, his one iron, whatever you call it. I'm not really a golfing fan, but it's been his main skill and the skill that has allowed him to be really effective, in the Summer League, because he's lacked a lot, but he also has had the level of awareness that I think has been quite positive as well. So, look, his 3-point shooting has been, truly sensational. The things he needs to improve on, I guess, is just the physicality at the NBA level that I think he needs to really improve on. And I think, look, he spoke about that, and Eric Slater posted a quote, and I want to sort of go through it. And I think this is what allowed Nets fans to really grow more enamored with Jaeger in terms of what he was able to show. So he said this: "It's a big transition, same as it was when I got to college and started playing conference games." Guys, give me 2 seconds. I just got to let my dog. Oh no, Bowie, you all right? You okay, buddy? That's the the fun of doing, I guess, the live buzzes. But in saying that, what he said, Jaeger, it's a big transition, same as it was when I got to college and started playing conference games. The Providence game, everyone saw this game. I can't say it was the best experience I've ever had, but it was a really useful game because those games prepared me for the most important part of the season in March Madness, where I was playing point guard full time. Games against Houston, the games against Iowa State, the games against Arizona, Baylor, where they're really trying to break you, especially me. They're trying to coach you like pressure. So he seems to have this level of awareness of like, look, his ball handling isn't really there right now. His strength certainly isn't there right now. So I think for him, what we're sort of seeing is some growth and some awareness. And I think, look, he needs, and I think it was Steve Hetzel, if I'm not mistaken, sort of said, like, look, he needs to hit the weight room. He is just a baby right now. So for him to grow, he's got to obviously get the strength. And from there, I think he'll be able to find more comfort with the ball in his hands, because his handle isn't necessarily the tightest in the world either. So he's got a ways to go. Let's just put it that way. He has a ways to go before he can be a pretty positive NBA player, a lead ball handler, lead playmaker, if you will. Right now, it looks like he's more of a secondary playmaker. I spoke about, Josh Giddey as a comparison point for him. But what I sort of saw was more that he was probably a Joe Ingles type, if anything, because of the 3-point shooting that he did show and the secondary sort of playmaking. And he can do a little bit with the ball in his hands, but against Summer League pressure, he wasn't able to show a lot. So at NBA level, it's going to be interesting to see how that sort of translates. Obviously this offseason, he's got plenty of time to sort of work on his body, but, what have we got, 3 months until, the NBA season sort of kicks off. So can't envision him putting on Giannis level of size and mass. But if the 3-point shot can stay there, then he's going to be able to be an effective NBA player, because we know he has the feel, and he'll obviously grow and add mass and add size. So I'm confident enough with what he's shown at Summer League, because the 3-point shot was maybe the biggest question mark about him. The scoring was the biggest question mark about him, because he's shown so much already at the college level in terms of his playmaking and especially in the pick and roll. So we'll see how it goes, I guess, with Jaeger moving forward. And as Crimson Striker said, got to hit on at least one of those 5 picks. And getting to one of those other 5 picks is a Nolan Traore. Now, maybe Nolan has been the most impressive so far out of all the guys we've seen. Now, what I've liked from him is his driving ability, especially when he's heading right as a direction. Now, he can get to the rim at will. He has pace. He has speed. But does he have the composure, the craft, the strength to really finish? He's shown glimpses, but I think getting there is one thing. How he can finish there is probably the next. Now, I think he has his first step is out of sight. His pace and speed. He might be one of the quickest guys, especially with the ball in his hands in the NBA. Now, not in the NBA, in the draft class. So that's something that I'm really excited about, is just that speed. And even the ability to get to the rim. And if he has a few misses, and Daron Sharp will certainly clean those up, Nick Claxton will certainly clean them up. So I think he can continue to. That's his prime skill, is that speed and the ability to get to the rim. What he does after that, I guess, remains to be seen. I think giving him the reps in Long Island as well as the NBA to just finish around quality defense is going to be intriguing to see what he can do moving forward as an NBA player. But that speed and pace is just sublime, truly sublime. And I think as a connective sort of piece, he's probably looked better as a playmaker than Yegor in a lot of stretches. I think him playing alongside like a Cam Thomas, I think is going to be intriguing and nice to see, and something that I'm certainly going to be looking at. So we'll see how that goes moving forward for Nolan. But things that I've also liked is his defense. I think he's actually, that's one thing, because of his size, and he's just a good point of attack defender. He seems to have good hands, seems to have good positioning in terms of, I think back to Joe Harris in terms of just like the fundamentals of defense and what he has. But Nolan Traore obviously has a lot more athletic traits than Joe Harris ever did. So we'll see how he goes there for when it comes to Nolan Traore and his defense. So I can't wait to see what he sort of does there. So beyond that, in fact, after a little mini break, guys, we're going to chat Danny Wolf and Ben Sarif. All right, apologies. Back to Nets basketball. Let's chat Danny Wolf. Now, Danny Wolf I've been on the Wolf pack. I've been in the Wolf bandwagon for quite a while. And part of that is because I love a passing big man. And this guy can pass. Like, he can seriously pass the ball. And he has fluidity and mobility for a big man that few guys actually have. And that's something that I'm really excited about. So we'll sort of see what he can do beyond just the sort of passing, because he's looked a little bit sloppy at times too. But what I have liked is, the offensive variety in his skill set. I think that that's something that I've really enjoyed. We'll see what happens in terms of, there was one shot, I think he had this like behind the back sort of dribble into like a floater, and it looks sort of, Jokic-esque, if you will. But what I sort of would say is, and let me see if I can actually share this. Okay, let's see if that's sharing. So what I really liked was the fact that he was able to like get to his spot and not be sort of handled by the defense, and still find a level of fluidity. So I really enjoyed him as an offensive hub. He's had some nice little dinky bounce passes as well. So I think in saying that, what I want to see moving forward is he's obviously tightened up the passes. I think he can probably easily do that by just sort of being a bit more composed, being a little less outlandish with the ball in his hands. But in saying that, he's got a lot to it. He's got a lot to him. And what will it take for him to, say, play alongside Clax, Sharp, etc.? I think it's going to be for him, can he really lock in defensively as a big man sort of hub? Where's he going to look better as a 4 or as a 5? Because as a 5, he's had sloppy moments, I guess is probably a moment that I've sort of a word that I've been using a lot. But he's Had also like a, let me find this possession and sort of describe it from that I sort of, he had like a steal on Wendell Moore Jr. in the Orlando Magic game where he was sort of rotating around the court really well and his feet were good. His center of gravity was good and he was able to create a little bit from there. And he's got like, he's strong. Like he's certainly a big fella, but what can he do as a sort of rim protector, as a backline sort of defender? Can he sort of be solid enough there? I've had my question marks about Darren Sharp in the past, but I think he proved that and then some this season. So can he grow as a defensive force like we've sort of seen from Darren Sharp in the last couple of years? The Nets do teach their big man the fundamentals well in terms of verticality and the general fundamentals of rim protection. So that's one thing I'm going to be looking for with Danny Wolf. But his passing is beautiful. Had a couple like nice bounce passes. He had a decent sort of jumper. His 3-point shot looks really good too. So like he's got, not Jokic, but he's got shades of, Alperen Sengun maybe. And, even like our guy Trendon Watford, he's just comfortable with the ball in his hands as a big guy. He can hit a little floater. He can hit the 3 balls. So, yeah, really excited by Danny Wolf. And the final rookie I wanted to get to, guys, was Ben Saraf. Now, Ben Saraf has, as a competitor and as a sort of physical force out of the sort of ball handlers that we've got, he's the one that sort of sticks out the most to me because he's just got an edge to him, an attitude to him, similar to what a lot of people have said, Manu Ginobili, that I think he does have. So I'm intrigued to see what he can do as a shooter because that is the one thing that has let him down quite a bit is his shooting. Now, he's had a couple of nice, fluid, mid-range sort of jumpers that have looked, D'Lo-esque because of the sort of lefty to him. But I think it's the one thing that's going to separate him from being a quality rotation player to being a bit player in the NBA. So what will he be? The shot will tell because he's a good driver, especially going left, and he can get to the rim and he is strong, unlike, maybe a Jaeger and maybe a Traore. That's one thing he does have. I don't think he has, obviously the speed of a Nolan, but his strength is there and he's got size for a ball handler, like 6'8"? That's huge, like massive. So if he can work on the shot, the shot doctors in Brooklyn can really help him out there, then that's something that I'm going to be really looking for and really intrigued about. So hopefully he can really find, something there. But he's also looked good as a defensive force too. I've really liked him on the defensive end. He's got some good hustle. Obviously the size, he's handsy in the right ways, but sometimes can be a little bit overly aggressive. But that's one thing, I didn't really know about him, but I have seen a bit from him in the summer league. So we'll see how he can go moving forward beyond, the driving, the attitude, the sort of competitive that he has. Those intangibles that you can't really teach. Ben Saraf certainly has, but they're going to need to teach him how to be a bit better as a shooter. And if he can find that, even just a smooth enough mid-ranger from the free throw sort of line, if not, hopefully beyond that, then he could be a pretty credible NBA player. But right now he's got glimpses, and we've seen probably the best glimpses from, it's hard to sort of say. I've loved Nolan the most out of all of our rookies so far, but Jaegor's shot has probably been the most pronounced. And because we know he can be a solid enough playmaker, the fact that the biggest question mark was on his playmaking, but was on his shooting, does that leave you with the most confidence? Look, the Nets, I think, are the most invested in Jaeger out of all the guys because, they took him with the 8th pick. So, and I think his character, and then Jordi Fernandez as the sort of point guard whisperer. Jordy's been in organizations with Jokic. Danny Wolf will benefit from that. He's been in organizations with De'Aaron Fox, Saraf, as well as Traore, and Jaeger will benefit from that too. Semi sort of ball handler, point guard whisperer. And I'm excited. Look, there's glimpses, and that's all you look for. You don't look at the box score. For me, I look for the moments, the plays, and we've seen some great plays from all of these guys. Obviously, there is plenty of ways to go, and how are these all guys going to fit together? Will their development be impeded because they have such similar skill sets? I don't know. That's a question that can only be answered by Jordi Fernandez, Sean Marks, and the rest of the guys there, because I think that they want multiple ball handlers, and maybe Nolan looks more like a lead playmaker, and Jaeger can be a secondary, tertiary playmaker, and Danny Wolf, sort of with his sort of chops as well. It's going to be intriguing to sort of see how they all sort of fit. Square pegs and round holes. I guess is probably the best thing to say. But guys, if you got any more questions for me around Summer League and stuff, feel free to hit me in the comments and stuff. I'll address them in whether in the current episode or the next episode moving forward. But been enjoying, just testing out to see what the sort of live stuff looks on YouTube. And I'll also get this up as a podcast as well for those listening that would prefer the podcast. But I wanted to get to finally a couple other Nets topics. Now, the one thing that has stuck out and is the Nets depth chart. The ESPN projected the Nets depth chart as follows. They had the Nets starters as Yegor Djemin, Cam Thomas, Zaire Williams, Michael Porter Jr., and Nick Claxton. Weirdly enough, they had Dariq Whitehead as a power forward rather than as a shooting guard / small forward, and Noah Clowney as a small forward rather than swap those two around. I think ESPN need to do a little bit more research, maybe listen to a little bit more of the Brooklyn Buzz. But look, as those are starting five, I've sort of been asked, who will start on opening night and stuff. But look, a part of me would rather have, say, you substitute Zaire for Traore or for Clowney, because I want to see those guys, and their maturation and develop at the NBA level. So, look, the depth chart isn't amazing. Look, there's a lot of guys, there that aren't NBA ready. How many will be in Summer League? How will be in Long Island moving forward? I guess we'll wait and see. But another thing, look, is the Nets cap space. Now, as it currently stands, the Nets have $17 million in cap space, which they can push to $25 million by waiving any non-guaranteed players. They can add the $6 million if they take Darren Sharp or Zaire Williams into an exception, but they must exhaust the space first. That was reported by Brian Lewis. So I think reporting this is the Nets going, hey, hear ye. Are there any other teams out there that want to dump anything for $17 to $25 million? And that was a question that I did get, actually, in terms of their cap space. Let me find it. It was from Michael. He sort of asked that. And I just addressed this on the last episode a little bit in terms of who will they get, in terms of future assets, young players. Could they take on Jeremy Grant? Now, I think, as I said in the last episode, the team that makes the most sense is Orlando with Jonathan Isaac. And whether that makes sense because his contract is still a couple of years, and Jonathan Isaac is a guy that I don't like in terms of his character, but is a really solid defensive player. And what assets can he get in return from Orlando, who are going to be very expensive very soon? Now, Grayson Allen, Royce O'Neal, these guys have 2-3 years left on their deals. You're going to have to get some juicy assets from Phoenix, who don't have any assets really to give to take on those contracts. So I think that's why we're seeing, I guess it leads me into the Cam Thomas discussion, because Cam Thomas contract updates, look, there's not a lot going on. And reported via the Stein line, Jake Fisher, whoever you sort of want to call, is that the Nets haven't really offered anything. Let me find the reporting, actually. It's right here. What is Brooklyn doing with its cap space? Sources say that the Nets have yet to even significantly engage their own restricted free agent scoring guard Cam Thomas. The Nets appear content on slow rolling the rest of their offseason accounting. They have roughly $24 million to absorb with additional salary and trades that could generate more incoming draft capital, while Thomas's cap at $12.1 million remains on their books. Thomas, for his part, faces a similar predicament to what confronts other prominent restricted free agents like Golden State's Jonathan Kuminga. There isn't much Thomas can do to force the Nets' hand without bidders in the marketplace that possess cap space of their own. I think people were looking into some of Cam Thomas's stuff on Instagram, where he was posting comments and song lyrics and that sort of thing. Look, ultimately, right now, the ball is not in Cam Thomas's court, unfortunately. It's just a matter of timing. And Zach Lowe on his podcast did predictions for what Giddey would get, what Kuminga would get, what Cam Thomas would get. And he had a prediction of Cam Thomas getting 2 years, $24 million. Now, I think that is way unders, and the second-year player option, because if that would have been the option, the contract he were to take, you might as well take the qualifying offer. And would he do that? Look, maybe if he gets such severe unders, but I think the way things currently stand right now, the Nets are going to prioritize other deals ahead of Cam Thomas. And for me, I predicted 354, 345. I don't think he's getting any above, those sort of late teens. And look, Zach Lowe said $12 million. He's a guy sort of is plugged in. I think 15-ish per annum. My revised sort of contract offer would be 345, maybe that 30 years a player option, $30 million guaranteed. Life-changing money for a young guy, but maybe Cam Thomas is going to hold out for Nickeil Alexander-Walker money. What was that, 464? Nickeil Alexander-Walker, for me, a much better player, much more impactful player. Colin Sexton money, but again, in a different sort of day. And he's Emmanuel Quickley money. Look, I think Cam Thomas has more talent than Emmanuel Quickley, just purely off of, and maybe that's subjective bias as a Nets fan, but Emmanuel Quickley struck when the environment of where the cap space and where contracts are these days, that's where we were sort of forecasting Cam Thomas could be. But where the cap currently is and the restrictions that are for the Nets and so many other teams, it's just unfortunate timing for Cam. Maybe he does take the qualifying offer. But guys, appreciate anyone who has joined me today on this episode of the Brooklyn Buzz. Maybe you're watching this on YouTube again after the fact. Maybe listen to me on the podcast. But subscribe to Off the Glass, Nick's OTG, baby. If you want me to do this again, hit me up in the DMs what you thought of the episode. If you've got any more questions, thank you to all the people that have tuned in. And Nets World, let's keep an eye on things. Nets World, let's go.